Welcome to the Fight Like a Mother podcast. I am Cheryl Cardall, your host. You have landed in a wonderful community where we give non-judgmental support for parents raising kids with mental health and other neurodiverse challenges. My main goal is to provide resources and especially a soft place to land. Go find me on Instagram and join our awesome community of parents under my name, Cheryl Cardall. Now on with the episode. Welcome back to the Fight Like a Mother podcast. I'm really excited about my fantastic guest today. My guest today is Lynn Muir. Her Instagram account is A Pocket Full of Paint. And I've been following Lynn for a long time. And this topic that we're going to talk about, she is the perfect guest for. So I'll introduce that in a minute. But first of all, we'll have Lynn say hi and introduce herself. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Okay, so my name is Lynn, and I grew up in Seattle, Washington, with two very creative parents. My mom was a semi-professional ballerina, and my dad's an engineer, but they're both very creative people. So my uncle is an artist, and I just grew up around a lot of artistic people. So I live in Utah now. I have 5 children who are also very creative human beings, like cardboard hoarding, whatever they can create with, they will create with. But I know they get that from me and their dad. He's also very creative. So we live in Utah. I have an Instagram account where I encourage women to be creative and to get outside. And I feel that both of those things are very healing and good for you, no matter where you are in life. Mm-hmm. And I also have another Instagram account called Pocket Full Paint Studio, where I share my artwork. And mostly I press flowers. I do a lot of watercolor paintings, but I also I press flowers and I kind of create a mosaic with the pressed flowers to create portraits or portraits of animals. It kind of sounds weird, but I absolutely love it. I paint a lot of murals and I share about that on my Instagram account. And I also have started doing women's retreats where I take women out in nature and we paint watercolors. We do the first day they're there, they learn how to paint watercolors with watercolors. And then we take them out on hikes and we do watercolors based off of what we see out in nature. So I love every type of creativity. I love every type of art and it just fuels me.
Well, I love that so much. And it's so obvious to me. I told you before we started recording that just watching you and your creativity, it's obvious that it lights you up and that you just absolutely love it. And I guess I haven't even said yet that today's topic is creativity and how it can improve our mental health and just our life in general, right? Even if you're not struggling with your mental health, like how it can help you. And I just have to say, your pressed flowers and the art you create with them are absolutely gorgeous. Like, I love flowers so much. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you can create artwork with real flowers.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really enjoyable.
So I'll have to share some of those on my Instagram account and during the week of your podcast so that people can see what they are, because they are gorgeous. I just love it. And so let's chat about, so you said you grew up around a lot of creativity with parents and extended family and things like that.
Yeah.
So do you remember ever not being creative?
No. I remember my mom always being creative. I also remember my parents grew up middle class, hardworking family, and just like kind of the mentality of if you want it, you have to get it done. Like you have to do it. And so I remember my mom wanted to make our room cute. So she stenciled, she wallpapered, she sewed the blinds. She did all the things. And my dad was very similar. Like they just got their hands in it and they got to work and they worked hard and whatever it was. And so I think that involves a lot of creativity in itself. You have to problem solve and be creative with problem solving. And along the way, you end up, creating things that you're proud of and that you worked on with your hands. And so I don't know. I remember being encouraged at a young age to draw, and maybe it was my parents trying to get me just to do something, get me out of their hair. But I still have drawings from when I was little that I've kept forever. So
I
I
love that.
always just loved art. So yeah.
I love that. And so I think a lot of us were not encouraged to be creative necessarily as kids. Maybe our parents weren't necessarily creative, or they thought maybe it was a waste of time or something. So, do you have any thoughts for parents to encourage their kids' creativity or encourage their own? Because sometimes when you grow up with that message of it's a waste of time or it's not worth it, or I'm not good at it, like what are
Yeah.
some ways to encourage the taking the risk of the creativity?
Ooh, the risk. I have so many thoughts just based off that, that
Go
one
for it. Share
question.
them.
Well, first, I feel like creativity and being artistic and the act of being artistic can really be a great companion to yourself throughout life, if that makes any sense. I know that sounds a little funny, but if I could break it down into maybe you have a child that's bored easily, or you have a child that doesn't feel like they're making friends easily.
Mhm.
Having the companionship of creativity in your life can help fill those voids. So
Wow.
I felt a lot. I felt a lot in my life. Sorry, I might get emotional. I am a crier.
Okay.
That I was alone, or that I didn't have a friend, or so my parents were always like, "Well, why don't you do this, or why don't you do this?" And when I found creativity, and I also that kind of came around again in my early married years, and when I first moved to Utah, I didn't know anyone here, didn't have any friends. Called one of my best friends back home, and well, at that time, home was California,
Mhm.
and she was like, "Why don't you just go buy a dresser and paint it?" And so I was like, "Okay, I will." And so I started painting furniture, and then I would I would buy furniture and I would paint it a fun color. And then I had a garage full of furniture I'd painted, and I started selling it. And then I started teaching people how to paint furniture. And it became a companion for me until I made friends. I just feel like creativity is a great way to fill voids that maybe heartfelt deep voids that not having friends or not fitting in. Creativity can just be a great outlet for a child or an adult that's missing that.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's really powerful. I'd never thought of it like that, but I think that's absolutely true. I have a quote that I found that I really loved that it says creative activities can have a powerful influence on our mental well-being. Engaging in such activities often absorbs our attention, which can distract ourselves from negative thoughts, help express our innermost thoughts, be a companion, and act as a form of meditation. And so I think, I mean, that's exactly what you were saying. Like it can like be that distraction or the fill that void when we're feeling lonely or anxious or depressed or all of those things.
Well, and there have been so many studies done that the act of using your hands, whether you're being creative with art, or maybe you're doing a flower arrangement, or you're making food, or whatever you're doing, if you're creating with your hands, your serotonin levels have they increase greatly. But it's not just like it has to be with your hands. You have to be using your hands in order for that increase to happen. And it's shown that when that increases, your serotonin level increases, that your blood pressure is lowered. So there's so much to being creative, but also using your hands to be creative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The science behind it is pretty cool.
Okay, so I am not artistic. I mean, and I know you probably have a rebuttal to that, right? I've said that before.
Well,
Like people
within
say
that
that,
within
but
that sciencey realm of serotonin and lowering your blood pressure, they say that even if you don't like what you are creating, or you think what you like is not, you're not doing it well, or you think it's ugly, the act of still creating it with your hands still gives you that positive serotonin burst.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people think like creativity is about painting or crafting or things
Yeah.
like that. And I think there's a lot of other things that can be creative that maybe
Yes,
we don't
I
even
agree.
have.
Yes, I
So,
think some people leave out even like meal planning can be
uh-huh.
creative, or planning a workout regimen can be creative. Like there's so many different ways you can be creative. Even I don't just there's so many fun things you can do that are outside of the pick up a paint and a paintbrush, which is my preferred form, but there's
Right.
so many things outside of that, like arranging flowers. There's so many great things. And then arranging flowers, you also get that nature aspect
Yes,
too.
yes,
So that's another
yes.
double benefits right there.
Another serotonin burst, you know?
Yep, that's right.
So yeah, I think that's great. So I think for our listeners, like if you think you're not creative, I mean, think about some things that you would like to try. I have a fun
Yeah.
story, and I've told it before on this podcast, but I knew of a young mom who was just like drowning in babies and diapers and all of the things, and she knew she needed to do something for herself. So she'd always wanted to learn how to tap dance. And so she bought a plywood board at Home Depot and put up a mirror in her living room, a portable mirror. And when her kids were taking naps, she found a YouTube channel and she taught herself how to tap dance. And I
Fun.
now is that the creativity in just figuring out how to do that. But she
Yeah.
said it just filled her up so much. So maybe your feet count too to do the
Yeah, maybe your feet count too. I do remember as a young mom feeling I had major postpartum depression after my first baby. And sorry, trying to get out of that funk that I felt. And I didn't at the time know about other resources. So I felt very stuck in it. But I called my dad one day and he encouraged me to be creative. And so I remember strapping her in the baby Bjorn on the front of me,
yeah.
and she was very drooly. And I started painting a watercolor painting. I didn't have an easel or anything. I just laid it flat on the table and I started painting, and she would drool, and her drool would drip onto the painting. And I was like, well, I'll just use it.
It's a collaborative painting.
It's a collaborative painting. But I feel like so many times when we're feeling stuck in ruts, being creative or finding creative outlet can really help us to be springboarded out of that, or it can lead to other things that can help us find the resources we need to get better help.
Well, I loved your example of like, get a piece of furniture to paint. That's where you started. And then it was like, oh, I have this whole garage full. I could sell this. And
Yeah.
then you were like meeting people and
Yeah.
then you were teaching people. I mean, look at what that springboarded into.
Well, and that's how I started my Instagram account. I started selling furniture and home decor signs, and then it morphed into other artwork and sharing about my family and my faith and just everyday life. And I've made some of my greatest friends on Instagram. So it sounds funny, but
lonely place.
From that lonely place, it built a community that I just absolutely love.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is amazing. So let's talk about the risk again. Let's talk about that. So somebody who says, like me, who says,
yeah.
I'm not artistic. If I picked up a paintbrush, it would be the ugliest thing. Like, how do you get confidence to take that risk?
So I've taught a lot of women art classes or at my retreats, and they're like, I don't know if this is for me. And some art projects are not going to be for you. But if you don't try, you'll never know. Right. So I think the biggest thing too is finding an expert in that field, whether it's a YouTube channel or there's so many Instagram accounts that can teach you how to get started in different art forms. And find somebody and take a class. Start with a class, because if you will probably just fail over and over again if you don't have the proper technique or you don't know how. If you don't know how to start, it can be really daunting. But we have such a great resource on the internet, on Instagram, Pinterest, all those things. So many different forums online that have classes or local classes. I remembered I wanted to learn how to do photography when I was a young mom. And so there was a photography class through my city for adults. So I took that, and then I wanted a little bit more. So then I went to the community college and I took another photography class. And then after that, I felt like I could kind of go off on my own. And so I think finding classes, finding stuff online to get started. And then you'll know like, oh, I really don't like this, or yeah, I really do. But I honestly think even for myself and any projects I'm doing, starting is always the hardest part. Just getting over that one little hurdle of I'm going to do it. And then I'm actually creating or I'm actually doing the thing, that's the hardest part.
It's true. It's true. Taking that step, like walking into that class or buying the materials. Like, I mean, I was thinking about this before we started. I was thinking about it earlier and I was like, I don't know that I would even know what to go buy.
Yeah.
So to start. And so, walking into
Yes.
Hobby Lobby, like, okay, asking somebody, you feel kind of stupid, but that's a risk. And that person's not going to think you're
Yeah.
stupid. Or they might, but who
Yeah.
cares? Right.
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's
Well,
the thing is it's like we have to kind of get over that hurdle of like, I might look stupid or
yeah.
I sound or look really
Well,
bad or whatever.
and I like to tell women, so when you walk into Home Depot, sometimes there's so many men and you feel so awkward, but if you walk in with confidence, nobody's going to question you. You just got to look confident
You just got
sometimes.
to own it.
Yeah, just throw your shoulders back and own it and just go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I have another really great quote that goes right along with this from Elizabeth Gilbert. She says, creativity itself doesn't care at all about results. The only thing it craves is the process. Learn to love the process and let whatever happens next happen. So
Amen.
it's the process of the creativity. Do you follow Glennon Doyle at all on social media?
That sounds really familiar, but I don't think so.
She
I'll
has a
have to go look them up.
podcast called We Can Do Hard Things, and she's written several books, but she struggles with her mental health quite a bit, and she talks about that. And she has started to watercolor paint. And she's like, I am terrible. And she's like, I've been doing this for months. I took some classes. She's like, I'm not good, but I don't care. My soul just craves doing it. And she's like, I set it up. I set my easel up in the living room and I don't care who sees me. I don't care, and I just thought she's all about the process because it has improved her mental health so much. So I think that's the key is like the process is the thing we need to focus on.
The process is where that serotonin comes in, the actual using your hands and, focusing on the details. That's where that really comes in. And then the dopamine, once you've got that hit of serotonin, then the dopamine comes in and it makes you want to create more and more. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely huge benefits to the process. The process is the whole thing. I mean, once it's done, you set it aside and walk away. But when you're in the process of it, you're in it, you're living with it. You're thinking about it when you're away from it. Like when I create some of my flower pieces, it takes me months sometimes to complete one. And I listen to a lot of podcasts while I work, and I can look at a piece and think of 4 different podcasts I listened to while I was working on that piece because you're just so involved in it. And when you're away from it, you're like, oh, how could I improve that? Or what kind of flower could I add to that part? Or what color needs to go there? You're thinking about it all the time, and it just becomes a part of you. And it just kind of also takes your mind off of all the other troubles that are going on in your day.
For sure. For sure.
Gives you a break.
Well, and I love that because I think for me in life, having something to look forward to, like the anticipation is half the fun. And so my birthday's coming up in a few weeks and we've rented an RV and we're going on a family adventure. And like, for me, like the planning of the adventure is half the fun. And so I was thinking about that when you were talking about creating the flower art is like you thinking about it. Oh, what kind of flower would go here? I mean, that's part of the creative process just as much as using your hands to do it.
Yeah, for sure. It just gives your brain another outlet. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And something to look forward
to.
And a positive outlet.
Yes, a positive outlet.
I know, especially when we're going through hard times, our brain naturally goes for the negative and looks for all the reasons why things are not going to turn out okay. But like something like this, like when you're working with beautiful flowers, how can you not help but be influenced by the beauty of it?
Yes. So a few years ago in 2020, right before everything shut down with COVID, I was diagnosed with, I'm going to get emotional again, invasive ductal carcinoma, breast cancer. And the first thing my mom sent me,
no apologies for crying here,
was a canvas and a set of paints and paintbrushes. And I didn't touch it. I was really angry for a pretty long time. but I kept the canvas in a corner of my bedroom where I could see it every day. And it just kind of kept me like, okay, some point I'm going to touch it. At
Mhm.
some point, I'm going to be creative again. At some point, I'm going to not be so angry and that I'll be able to move forward and find myself in creativity again. And that's when I started pressing flowers. I saw people doing it online and I thought that looks really enjoyable, like getting outside. So I'd been laying in my bed a lot
Yeah.
or in the doctor's office. So, and I love flowers. I've always just really been drawn to, I think everybody is. If you're not, I don't know.
We can't be friends if you're not.
Um, so I started trying it out. I started pressing flowers and just kind of experimenting with it. My whole first batch went completely moldy. And I just kind of started playing with it and I started enjoying it so much that I all of a sudden realized I had thousands of flowers that I had pressed that I had nothing to do with. I just had them in drawers and I was like, what am I going to do with all of these flowers? And then I took that canvas my mom had sent me and I started making, what was it? My first one, I think, was an elk. I was like, I'm going to make an elk out of flowers. And so I sketched it out and then I just started gluing the flower petals on and that's how that all started. So it was my mom sending me a canvas and then slowly getting out of my funk of having cancer and while the world was shutting down with COVID and it's been one of the most beautiful things I've ever done with my time.
Mm, mm. Well, I love that canvas was like a ray of hope to you. Like, I can't access that part of me now, but someday I'll be able
Yeah.
to again. I
Yeah.
love that. I
Just a
love
little light in the corner.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know when I'm struggling, sometimes that creative process, it does feel like it's shut down.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, okay,
And then
but
it can just add to the getting, the hard to start
uh-huh.
when
Yes.
you're already struggling mentally, then to get yourself going on that just can be another
Another
little hurdle, but
yeah,
it's such a blessing when you just get going,
when you just start
when you
and
just start.
start small, you know,
Yes.
start small. I love that. Well, you're
A
also
big canvas and just throw some paint on it. Just go to town.
get angry at it.
Just kidding. Just start. One of the most fun art projects I've ever done, and maybe could be great for anybody. You don't have to be artistic to do this, but you just get a big canvas, just get whatever paint you have. It can even be household like wall paint, and you just start pouring it on the canvas, and then you pick up the canvas. You need like a tarp underneath. This will
Right.
get very messy. And then you just start tilting it and tipping it and adding more paint and tilting and tipping and then just let it sit for a couple days. It's so much fun.
That really does really sound fun. So if you don't feel artistic, like that's something I could do. Anybody could do that,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
Anybody could do that. Yep.
And then maybe from that, you're like, oh, that looks kind of cool. Maybe I could try another medium of, creative.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, I have a daughter who is creative to her core being. And I'm like, where did she come from? But hers isn't necessarily like artwork, but she makes jewelry and bracelets. And when she was little, I mean, she made the most incredible things out of rainbow loom bands. And,
Yeah.
so I think like, and I think sometimes, like you said, this one's messy. Sometimes that mess like keeps us from trying. You're like, oh, well,
I have found that for me, it's because I'm such an artistic, messy person, and I know I take up a lot of space with my art. I didn't realize that was hard for other people
yeah,
until people started expressing like, oh, I would do that, but it's so messy. And I'm like, or I would let my kids do that, but they'll make such a big mess. And I've had to really try to understand that point of view, but then also try to encourage the mess.
yeah,
Like just let go and let the mess happen. Cause that's when some of the best creativity happens, especially with our children. Like I have one daughter who loves to sew and that takes up a lot of space and it can get messy. And I have a son who can create something out of nothing. Like he'll create a full bodysuit out of cardboard. And that is extremely messy and frustrating. And even though I'm very creative and messy, I still get frustrated with it. But sometimes you just have to let it
Yeah.
let it be. Like embrace the mess. And I think there's a lot to be said for embracing the mess and getting messy yourself.
Well, isn't that just true about life? Like embracing the mess and just,
Yes.
what I was going to say about my daughter is, so, she'd have these rainbow loom things, or she'd have her beads out or her jewelry stuff out. And I walk in her room and I'd be like, but I try to just like let that go and be like, she's in the process of creating the stuff she creates in the mess. Like you said, it's pretty beautiful. She's made me some stuff that I absolutely love. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. And I wonder how many of those people who don't like the mess were told as kids, like, that's too messy. You can't do that. We don't have,
Oh, yeah.
they didn't have paint or Play-Doh or, all
Yes.
those things at home because it was too messy and mom
Yes.
didn't want to deal with it. And I get it. Like we deal with enough
Yeah.
messes as it is, but I think
Yeah.
it make our lives. I remember getting like a really big Play-Doh set when my kids were little. And somebody was like, oh my gosh, the mess this is going to create. But do you know how many hours of creativity and how many hours it gave me to get things done or to do something I wanted
Yes.
to do? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
and it might be messy, but Play-Doh is amazing because you can mix. I have friends too. They're like, I don't let my kids mix the colors, and I'm like, how could you dare let them mix the colors? I'm like, you let them mix the colors. That is part of the creative process. Let them do all the creative things with it because that's where their problem solving gets better. Like um then they go into the classroom and because they've been creative, they can problem solve math better. They're better at English. They're better at communicating with their peers. There's so many benefits to letting your kid experiment and get messy and be creative. It bleeds into all the other aspects of our lives.
well, I think even like subconsciously, it's giving them confidence that they can solve these other problems. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I can do this
Yeah.
because I've figured out stuff before. And it may
Yep.
have been like a painting or Play-Doh or something that you might not think even relates, but it really does. And
Yeah.
maybe it does that for adults too.
I think it does. I think too, seeing your progress is also something that really benefits us mentally. I have a daughter that just wanted to draw mermaids every single day, and I've kept all her mermaid drawings because I've loved seeing how they've evolved over
Yeah.
time. And I know she's going to want to look back and be like, "Oh, look at my funny little stick figure mermaids." And now look at my mermaids. They have shape and body and their hair flows in the water and there's so much to the process and then also looking back on what you've done and seeing how far you've come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just thinking back to you like, oh, I decided to create an elk with my first project of my flower. But that came because like all the other creative endeavors you've done,
Oh
like
yeah,
you had the confidence,
100%.
like I can do this. I asked you, I think, on Instagram a
Oh, and
couple
I have
of days.
failed a lot of times.
Well, it's part of the process, right?
It is part of the process. I've
Yeah.
made some really ugly things. You can ask my husband. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I just was thinking about that. I'm like, how cool that she was like, I'm just gonna make an elk. Like, no big deal. But I think I asked you a couple of weeks ago on Instagram. I sent you a DM and I was like, so like the flower pressing looks really interesting to me and like I would like to do it, but I'm like, I'm not artistic. What do I do with the flowers? And you're like, well,
Yeah.
put them in a frame. And I was like, okay.
I think they make really great gifts if you just put a single flower in a small frame. It's an easy gift. So
Well,
I
now
know
that
it.
I'm thinking
I
about this, a friend of mine for my wedding took my wedding invitation and put pressed flowers. She arranged
Oh,
pressed flowers on it. And I think I still have it somewhere. You know,
yeah. Oh,
so
that's
I mean,
special.
that's probably pretty
I've done a
simple.
few I've done a few wedding flowers, but I've done a lot of funeral flowers for
Mm-hmm.
people, which I actually kind of enjoy more than the wedding flowers. Just has more meaning behind it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, I love your thoughts on this and your suggestions to people to get messy, to, um, I actually was going to say, I have a guitar sitting in my closet, and I've always wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And I know like a couple of really basic chords, but I don't know. The thing that's held me back is I don't know how to tune the guitar. I don't know how to take care of it. But I'm like, you know what? YouTube,
YouTube,
teach me
teach
how.
everything you want to know.
And I'm like, I'm going to get that guitar out this summer and I'm going to try it. That's using your hands. That's creative. I love music.
There's a lot to music therapy too. I once wrote a 40-page paper about music therapy, and there is a lot to that too for mental health. So
Yes, yes. So
do it. Play
I
that guitar.
I think there's so many creative outlets that we can do. I mean, I was even thinking as you were talking, like creating my podcast is a creative outlet, you know, thinking about it, writing things out, producing it, creating the graphics for it. I mean, there's so many different ways to be creative that
Yeah.
we just need to explore.
I think anywhere you're putting in your imagination and putting in work is 100% a creative endeavor. So something where you're using your brain, you're using your hands, you're using your passions to create something, you know, that's a creative outlet. So it's just a really beautiful thing too. When like your podcast, I've watched your podcast from the very beginning before you even started it. And it's just so fun to see it flourish and the people that you're talking with and the subjects you're taking on. And it's definitely a creative outlet and something that's a positive thing, you know, bringing joy to other people. Like, I think that's one of the best things about art too, is that it doesn't just bring joy to me. You know, my kids love my art. They're inspired by it. I have friends inspired by it. So it's just really fulfilling.
Well, and I think one of the best things about producing something or creating something, not producing, but you know, creating something is it affects everyone so differently. You know, your artwork that you've created for somebody that elk means, oh, I miss my dad. We used to hunt elk together. For somebody else,
Mhm.
it was like, I think elk are the most magnificent creatures and it's so inspiring for them for nature. You know, and
Yeah.
I loved your hummingbird that you did. Like a hummingbird to me is like this little symbol of like angels, you know, but for somebody else, it's something completely different. And so I think that's one of the fun things. Like my podcast, I'll put one out into the world and somebody will gain something from it that I never considered. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is it's going to affect everybody so
Yes.
differently.
So
So,
true.
so it is a beautiful process. And do you have any last thoughts or words to share with people?
Um, I would just say don't let fear stop you and don't let the fear of messes, don't let the fear of failing stop you. Just go for it. And if you want to just go big the first time, go big. Go. I've painted my fence before. I've painted all kinds of things. Like just go for it. Turn on some good music and just try to enjoy the process and just be in the moment.
Well, and I think like with paint, you can always paint over it. You know,
Exactly.
if you hate it, you can
Exactly.
always paint over it. And there's no such thing as failure, I think, with this. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, it's about the process. So I just love all the things that you've shared and how inspiring it's been in your own life through your own, you know, health challenges and mental health challenges and things like that. So I think just the message, I think, is just embrace the mess and enjoy the process.
Yep.
Well,
100%.
well, Lynn, why don't you tell people where they can find you and kind of what your next projects are?
Okay. You can find me at Pocketful Paint on Instagram or on Facebook or pocketfulpaint.studio. And my next project, I am actually taking on custom orders, which I haven't done. And I'm pressing some flowers for people from their yard and then creating some pieces for their home. So that's what I'm working on right now. And then just keeping my children alive and making sure they pass 8th grade.
And that is a creative process in and of itself. I'm doing the same thing with an eighth grader.
Oh man, 14-year-olds. I love them, but they are the hardest ever.
My friend calls it the scruffy ages.
We call them our favorite idiots, which maybe not very nice. Yours is nicer.
I think it's the same message.
Oh man.
Do
Yeah.
you have any retreats coming up or are you done with those for
I have a retreat coming up in November of this year, and tickets go on sale June. It's going to be in Moab, and I'm going to have usually I only have 8 spots available, but this time I'm going to have, I think, almost 14 spots. So we're trying to expand a little bit. And we're going to be doing a lot of plein air painting. I'm bringing in 2 other artists to come with me.
So,
So we're going to be doing a lot more artwork, and we're going to be going on some amazing hikes and doing some sound baths and some grounding and just enjoying nature and enjoying learning new skills and making new friends. So that will be my next retreat. And then I don't know what I'm doing after that so far.
okay. Well, watch for that with Lynn. Watch on her Instagram. She'll announce that when the tickets go on sale. And thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun to talk with you.